and welcome to Road TV. My name is Matt Reese. I'm the owner of Road to California and your host. Today we are interviewing Esterita Austin, who is a Road at Home faculty member, an award-winning quilter, magazine author, all sorts of stuff. She is a master of so many different items here. She is teaching 2 classes and a lecture for Road at Home. Her first class is W119 4x4 that is offered on Wednesday. T115 Luminous Painted Irises on Thursday, and her lectures on Friday, FL01 Inspirational Journeys. Thank you for joining me today, Esterita. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm doing great.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you on here. So let's talk a little bit about the journey that led you to quilting and how, how you have the expertise that you have today.
What an unexpected question. No. Oh, so the journey. I started out as an art teacher back in the 70s. And I guess my forte, what I enjoyed the most was drawing, painting, and photography. And when I started quilting, which I'll get into a little later, when I started quilting, I really wanted to be able to take the painting and the drawing part and put it into my quilts. But I tried for a long time experimenting with things. But then I want to say around 2003, my business partner and I started Misty Fuse. And I really wanted a very light fusible that would help me try to transfer images onto fabric and use it for heavier things, etc., fabrics. So I've been experimenting for a long time with the Misty Fuse and transferring my images. And I've, through a lot of trial and error, I finally got a technique that I really enjoy. And that's the one I'll be teaching, the painted irises for Rhode. It's the same technique. It's a shorter technique. Of course, it's just the basic transfer, but you do learn to paint in this class, and you paint along with me. You could see the piece behind me is a piece that was done with that technique. It's painted on a base of parchment paper and then transferred to a transparent organza with Misty Fuse. And it's really, in concept, it's a very simple technique, but it does take a little bit of finesse, and there are all different things you can do with it. This one has about 6 layers of paint that are behind me. In class, we'll just do 1 layer of paint, but I've really enjoyed working with it.
It looks very complicated and almost daunting, but my guess is there's a secret that makes it not so scary for the beginner.
There is. I hate to say it, but it's like a coloring book. It's a pattern that's placed down with the parchment paper, and you have the pattern to work on top of. So it really is a coloring book. And when you have a photograph next to it with all the colors, then it can easily transfer the imagery onto the paper with the paintbrush. It's not difficult at all.
So it's really a good class for somebody who might not be a painter and kind of wants to bridge the gap and see how they could apply paints to fabric then.
Definitely. And if they are painters and they're more advanced, they can kind of use it as a leaping off point, and they don't have to follow the pattern. They can go in their own direction and do the same technique. So it really does go from beginner to advanced.
That's wonderful. It kind of allows people to, if they need more structure, it seems like it can give them more structured ways. And if they need a little bit more of a free spirit approach, they can go forth. Like if they wanted the camel to be pink, they could always make their camel pink and shade it, and that's great. So how did you actually get started with the nuts and bolts quilting aspect?
Okay, let's go back to 1972. I was backpacking through Greece, and I was on this little island of Eos that had these stairs that went up the island. It was like kind of a mountain. And I went up and I settled into a little pension, a little boarding house, rooming house, whatever. And I went in there and I was sitting out in the back on a picnic bench, having some lovely Greek yogurt. Of course, where else are you going to get Greek yogurt but Greece? And drizzled with some delicious honey. And out of the kitchen came a young woman and her boyfriend, and they were arguing in Italian. So I had just come from Italy. I was studying art history in Italy. And she was saying, I want to go out. I want to go shopping. I want to have fun. He said, well, you can't. You need a chaperone. And women don't go out here without a chaperone. This was 72. It was a little retro. And evidently, he owned the place and he didn't want her going off on her own. So she sat down next to me. She was so disappointed. And she just started crying. And I thought, oh God, now I have to be nice to this woman. But I did speak Italian. So I said to her, can I help you? Is there anything I can do? And she started speaking to me in Italian about this boyfriend who was so controlling. And then she stopped and said, oh, how do I say this in Italian? She was British, not a very good British accent on my part. And I said, oh, good. We can talk English. So we just kind of laughed that we were both struggling in Italian. So we took off and we went on a ferry, and I'm sitting there with my DMC floss, patching up my holy jeans with rainbows and hands with flowers. And she's got these little pieces of Liberty of London fabric and paper hexagons, and she's finger pressing them, cutting them up, finger pressing them, and whip stitching them together. I said, what are you doing? She said, well, I'm making a quilt. You should know, it's an American pastime. I said, you mean you cut up this fabric and put it back together again and make a design of your own? She said, yeah. I said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. And, a little bit mouthy, what can I say? So we lost touch and we didn't see each other for a long time, but we had our contact information. Fast forward 20 years, we get in touch because the internet finally came into being. And she asks me, so what are you doing with yourself? And I had to tell her I was a quilt teacher. So she definitely got the last laugh.
Well, that's wonderful. So you mentioned you're a quilt teacher. How long have you been teaching quilting?
I'm going to say 21, 22 years approximately.
And did you always teach painted quilting, or did you start with more piecing? Or
I started off myself traditionally doing log cabins, lots of log cabins, and then did mostly all traditional quilts. And then I took a class from David Walker, and my eyes just were opened. He was a wonderful art quilter, and he just showed me the possibilities. And it just really allowed me to use my art background to experiment and go off in the art quilting world.
well, that's awesome. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your studio. Do you have a studio at home?
I do. Actually, I'm in it. It was a two-car garage at one time that I had converted into a studio. So it's got a lot of nice light windows all around. And I put a wood floor in. I treated myself. And I've got a Q20 machine, sit-down long arm, and a couple of Berninas. They're old, but they're faithful, 1630 and a 930. And I love to sequester myself in here, especially during this time.
Absolutely. So during this time since COVID had started, what have you been doing?
Well, it's funny. I've kind of gone back to my roots. I've made three traditional quilts, more Navajo style that I know my kids wanted. And I started as soon as we started quarantining because I just needed something to do without thinking, without, being too creative. Well, it is creative. And I put these two queens and a king size quilt together and shipped them off. Um, and right now I'm doing a lot of teaching. So I'm busier with teaching out of the studio than I am with making my own things. But I have some pieces in mind that I want to start a new series.
Awesome. We can't wait to see them. I'm sure they'll be entered in a show sometime here soon once we all get back together again.
I hope so.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about your classes. You offered a class that we're actually offering on Wednesday that was really intriguing to me. It was, I believe we're calling it 4x4.
Right. Yeah. It's basically four very different techniques that I teach. I teach more techniques than that, but I've chosen 4, and I'm going to do a presentation of each technique, um, and do what I would do in the beginning of a class, going through the step by steps and explaining it, and showing images of the progression. So everybody can get an idea of what each class is about in case any guilds are interested in having me. It's They're techniques that I've developed, they're mine, and I've really enjoyed it.
So it sounds like a great class for someone to take who either wants a crash course, sees what you can do, see all the different, some of the different techniques that you have to offer. It sounds like a really great intro, like a lecture demo kind of a class.
And people can experiment on their own. They're things that, that's what art quilting is all about, is experimenting and coming up with something new and different. So they can take these ideas and take off with them.
Wonderful. And let's talk. We talked a little bit about the techniques about your Thursday class, the luminous painted irises. Do you have anything else you want to add about that course?
I think it's my favorite. I just love it. There's just so much you can do with it. And there are so many things that you can add to it if you choose to afterward, not just paint. You could use all different materials, markers and pens. And I go into that and talk about those things and how they're applied. And it's a kind of thing you can even do with children. Little kids can do it, almost finger painting, if you will. But then the adult would just handle the iron when it's ready to be transferred. So it really does span different ages.
Well, that's awesome. My guess is every time you offer this, every student's work is just it's different, isn't it?
Definitely. Yes. Yeah,
So
that's what I love about it.
they get to leave with something unique. I think that's special. It's not like everyone's making the same log cabin block or nine patch. You get something that's truly yours when you're done.
Exactly. Now they all start out with the same pattern, but everyone is totally different by the time they're done. And it looks great.
Sounds like a wonderful time. Students should really, really enjoy that. Now let's talk about your lecture a little bit, because my guess is we got a little bit of information out of the lecture when it was your backpacking trip through Greece. But what else? It sounds like a fascinating lecture.
Well, it's basically about, luckily, being a quilter, I've been able to travel quite extensively. And in doing that, I've taken a lot of photographs, as most people do when they're traveling. And all those photographs are food for whatever ideas I have in doing my quilting. So I may take a series of photographs from an area like Egypt or like Georgia and take them and translate them into quilts. And I show the quilts, the photos I've taken, and the process and travel that they've taken to get into a series of quilts.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that'll be helpful. I think people should take the series of classes to be able to end with the inspiration of how to use that photograph, so they can conclude the week kind of with a general knowledge of what you have to offer. So I have to ask, what is different about teaching online than in person?
The thing I like about teaching online is that I've got a camera right over my workspace. So everybody can see up close exactly what I'm doing, because it's not really large pieces I'm working with. They're 8 by 10, 11 by 17. So they can see it up close, and they can see it stroke by stroke, or piece of fabric by piece of fabric. And it's really, the view is terrific. It's much better than being in a classroom with people crowded around a table. And what was the other thing? Oh, I love the fact that people can take a photograph with their phone of what they're working on, text it to me, and then I can screen share it and use annotation to show them where they can work on certain areas and what they can do to change it. So it's really visually really works well.
Great. Are you ready to get back to traveling again once you're done with the pandemic?
I'm not so sure. I don't know. I'm kind of enjoying teaching from my studio. But as long as it's really safe, yes, I'll get out there.
I'm sure, and we're hoping that it will be safe again very soon. Well, I appreciate your time and coming on today. If anybody out there wants to sign up for Esterita's classes, she's teaching on Wednesday, W119, that is 4x4. She's teaching on Thursday, T115, Luminous Painted Irises. And she's offering a lecture on Friday, FL01, Inspirational Journeys. You can register for these classes at www.road2ca.com. And you have a website as well, yes?
I do. It's EsteritaAustin.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Road TV with me today. And I wish you good health, and hopefully very soon we can see each other again.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt.